Hi, I'm Olivia, and I'm going to be talking about my experience meditating in silence for 10 hours a day for 10 days. So let's discuss how this even happened. I was just on YouTube and I love yoga. I went on a yoga teacher training in 2019 and it's just a part of my life. So I feel like a lot of the content I get is related to self development and spirituality and stuff like that. And this Canadian girl, I think she's Palestinian, Canadian girl called Fatin came up on my feed. Her channel isn't super big or whatever, but I just loved her style of videos, and they were all about like Kundalini and different kinds of spiritual stuff. So I'm looking at her channel, and she's like, you know, meditated for 10 days or whatever. And I'm like, okay, what is this? And she was talking about her experience and what you had to do. And I was like, wow, like that sounds hard, but it also sounds useful. So I was aware of it and I looked for this vipassana. She was in Canada and I was like, okay, they have them all over the world. Let me have a look. They have two in the UK and I was like, okay, cool. That sounds like something I would want to do. And at the time I was working full time. So 10 days off is quite a long time at any given time, but I was also going back to university. So I was like, okay, I have free time. I just kind of need to know when to do it. And I was always trying to look. I think I must have found that video at like the start of 2021. No, start of 2022. Because I kept on looking and going and being like, oh, what are the course dates? Like, can I make it work? And I must have known about it for about half a year before I actually was like, okay, I can go in December. It all works out. And I set my alarm on the day. Like, it was in the middle of summer, like half a year before. I was in Colombia. The time zones were different, and I was like, I'm putting my application in straight away. I did all of that, and I got a spot on the course, and I was like, oh my gosh, so exciting. So I kind of completely forgot about it and put it on the back burner. And the timing was just before university broke up for winter, and it meant that I had to graft on some deadlines to make sure that I had everything submitted like a week or so before like it needed to be in. And yeah, like I was just so kind of caught up in university life and everything that I didn't even really look back or try and pay any more attention to what I was getting myself into. Because initially when I signed up, I'd read through everything. I was like, this is something I could commit to. And then, oh my gosh, actually doing it in practice and in person is totally different. Like I knew I could do it and I did actually do it, but the experience was like, wow, it was a lot. So there's two centres in the UK, and part of the reason I love this meditation course is I feel like so many things associated with spirituality, like yoga retreats and learning things, all of these are tools that are supposed to uplift everyone, but there's often a barrier put in place, like a financial one of, okay, you can go on this yoga course that's going to change your life, but you have to pay like thousands of pounds to do it. And I think it's just very not at the centre of what the practice is about. And with this, there's no vested interest or anything. It runs solely on donations, and you can only donate if you're someone who has completed the course. So that kind of keeps it free from like entities putting different things on it. And I just like morally, that just aligns with me very well. So, and there's such a community around it. I feel like when you do anything with spirituality, it's kind of the same with religion as well. Like if you're at a church or whatever, like there's this such community feel, and that people want to help and they want to get involved, and I love that. So there's a ride board, and I live in London, so I was like, oh, perfect. There's definitely going to be someone going from London. Put my name on this ride board. Someone got in contact with me called John. I already knew, I already knew from the way he was messaging that he was an old man. I was just like, yes, can't wait for this car journey, because there's definitely a lot of older people who are more into like meditation practices and spirituality and stuff. And I'm like, okay, these people have all got like everyone has their own paths, and there's people from so many different backgrounds, and it's just so interesting to hear about it and learn wisdoms from other people who have different experiences. Because I would, if I was in the street, He was in his 70s. Like, I would have never spoken to this man, but because we're both going and we have this shared interest, it's like you have a common field to talk about, and I just love it. So I got in a car with this guy called John and this girl called Carolina who was in her 20s. He was a psychotherapist and she worked in environmental tech, and I'm like, wow, like these careers sound so cool and like things that I'd be interested in. Just having like the best conversations and learning things about people on the way there. So I was already super, super excited. I made a terrible mistake, which is like very not spiritual, very not in alignment, but everything happens for a reason, and thank God there was a space for me. But somehow I had put my name on the wrong ride board because there's two centres, and I showed up at the wrong place. And they're like hours apart, and I hadn't driven there, I was in somebody else's car, so it was just like, oh my gosh, my stomach dropped. But thankfully, someone on the course was able to sort me out and they had a bed for me, and I was like, thank God, like everything was supposed to happen, I was supposed to go to that one. So you can chat with people for a little while when you arrive there, but it's like the evening, and because it's winter, it's like all dark outside and stuff like that. You're like, oh my gosh, okay. And then you go in the hall and you meditate and you take a bout of noble silence. So that is not just not speaking to anyone, it's like avoiding eye contact, being completely like to yourself, which is so challenging, but it's also something that's so beautiful and it allows you to turn more inward into yourself. And I think that noble silence is what allows you to meditate to the extent that you do, but it's obviously also quite challenging. I think I'd have been able to do it if it weren't for like the other rules. So when you practice vipassana, you're only allowed to practice this technique, and it can work with other things like yoga, but just because of how everything is set up, you can't do anything. So you can't read, you can't listen to music, you can't write, you can't your phone gets locked away, like that's a given. And it's a lot. It is a lot. And I really struggled with not being able to listen to music. I really struggled, and it made me realise being in silence for 10 days made me realise how important arts are to me. Like I always knew they were, but reading and music were like, that's what I was craving the most. Forget even talking to someone else, like having that interaction and having that stimulation in my mind, like that's so important to me. That's what I love to engage with and everything. So I was like, oh, it made me realise my values. So let me talk you through a day in the life. I've got a schedule here, and this was pretty much followed every day, which sounds so boring, but I'll put a picture of it on the screen as well. I've got it here. So 4 a.m. you'd wake up. 4:30 to 6:30 you can meditate in the hall or in your room, and I would always choose to meditate in my room when I had the opportunity to, because I found it easier to be more comfortable. I could have a support on my back, and I didn't feel like when I was disturbed I was disturbing anyone else. So that was just my preference. But I talked to someone at the beginning who was like, oh, always make sure you go in the hall, because there is something to be said about that shared atmosphere of being in a space with so many people who are meditating. But for me, I was like, mm-mm. So 6:30 to 8 breakfast break, 8 to 9 group meditation, 9. So when you have the group meditation, literally everyone who is on site meditates at the same time, and men and women are split into two. So there's men on one side, women on one side, and each has like a meditation teacher at the front who you can go and ask questions to, and who like kind of guides everything. And at the front there's like seats for the people who are serving. So the course is run by people who have done a course before, who are dedicated to the technique, and they'll come and they'll like prepare food, clean, like it's all an act of service that they do to support other people meditating. So they'll sit at the front as well. And like everyone who's on site meditates 3 times a day, which it just creates like this atmosphere. Like it's just so peaceful and so lovely. So 9 to 11 meditate in the hall or in your room. In a morning they would have the men like stay behind, and if anyone had they'd like take you up in a group once a day. So you and like 4 or 5 other people would go and sit at the front, and the teacher would ask, like, are you able to feel this? And you could ask any like questions or whatever. And yeah, so in the morning the men would do that, and then 11 to 12 lunch, and then 12 to 1 you can rest, so like a longer lunch and interviews with the teacher, so you could write your name on a board, and then if you had any questions you can go and ask the teacher like personal things, so it's not entirely in silence, but you should really avoid talking to people as much as possible. Then 1 till half 2, meditate in your room or in the hall. half 2 to half 3, group meditation. Half 3 to 5, meditate in the hall or in your room, and then 5 to 6 is the tea break. So you only actually eat twice a day, and you're supposed to stop eating after midday. People who have done the course before don't have anything. And I found it really difficult. Let me just run through the rest of the schedule and then I'll talk more about that. So 5 to 6, tea break. 6 to 7, group meditation in the hall. 7 to 8:15, teacher's discourse in the hall. So Goenka is the person who taught the technique, and there's literally these VHS tapes from like 1993 or something, and it gets projected and you listen to him teaching the technique, and the discourse explains like what you're going to be learning the next day and experiences and challenges that you might be facing. And it kind of felt like you were in a movie night with people but you couldn't speak to them. It was just like a very relaxing thing. And then once that was over, there was 8 till 9 group meditation. So he would talk about the technique, and then you'd have like a shorter meditation, like 45 minutes, which is shorter than the other sessions that you would sit for. So you're only really ever sitting at most for an hour and a half at a time. And then 9 till half 9, if you had any questions, you could go up and talk to the teacher, but I would just go to bed. And then half 9, you'd go to bed, lights out, boom, like that's everything. So food wise, the food was like all vegan, super healthy, very like plain, so that, you know, it was delicious as well, like don't get me wrong, but it's so that you're not being disrupted or whatever. And yeah, I just loved it. But because I don't know what it was, because you're waking up at 4 and that's super, super early for me. I would normally wake up at like half 6, 7 when I'm in a good, don't hold me accountable to that, but when I'm in a good space, that's when I'm waking up at. So waking up at 4 is like, oh, that's a bit of a shock to the system. And like, I'm a person who has a massive appetite in the morning. Like I love to eat a big breakfast, and you were obviously only eating 2 meals a day, but I would be sitting there and I would be gagging. I couldn't eat the food. Like I just don't know what it is, and I was getting really frustrated. Like I just want to eat a bowl of cornflakes so I've got something in me, because I'm not going to be able to eat for hours. But yeah, the food was so good. I tried gamasio for the first time. No one told me what that was. I'd never encountered it, but that was probably the biggest blessing and takeaway. So it's like sesame seeds and salt. Like it was very crunchy. It was very, very crunchy behavior. I'd never seen so many Birkenstocks in one place, so many different plant milks. I was like, this is super vegan, super crunchy. In terms of the demographic, like I was definitely one of the youngest people there. There were more young women than there were young men. And I like that. I love being in a spiritual place. I loved it when I was on my yoga retreat and I was a teenager, because people tend to find these techniques later on in their life when like something has gone wrong, like some accident, some life force, some divorce, relationship thing has thrown them off track, and they've ended up turning to spirituality. But to be involved with it from a young age, like it's just so interesting, and you get to learn so much from the people around you, and I just value being in a space like that so, so, so much. So what was I actually doing? The technique, you start with a technique called Anapana, which is focusing on your breath, like here, so around your nose and your upper lip. And I kid you not, because you're spending so many hours meditating a day, like you can feel every sensation. It's like almost as if you can feel the breath like touching each nostril hair and then leaving and coming back in and out. Like it was so crazy how attuned I became to my body. And then you start scanning your body eventually, so little by little, like I would start here and like scan back and feel all of the sensations. And it's like the aim is to sit and observe things how they are. You don't control it, which is totally different from any kind of meditation technique I tried before. Like I say, I went on a yoga teacher training, so I'd done yoga nidra, I'd done pranayama, which is like cleansing with the breath and controlling your breath. And this was just like sitting there chilling, and I was like, it was really difficult at times, but I also found it like really good. And I had been writing in my journals so many times, like I really want to have a strong mind-body connection, which is a bit odd for me to say because I have a strong yoga practice, but sometimes I feel like my limbs or whatever, like I'm just not, I can be quite clumsy, and I just want to be that delicate like dancer who has that connection. And I don't know, I just felt like I was able to cultivate that sense while I was there, and to some extent once I left. Um, on day 4 when I was there, we woke up one morning and it had snowed, and this was in Hereford, so it was like it's near to Wales, and the snow was so thick. It was absolutely stunning. It was just, and you couldn't talk to anyone about it. I'd never seen snow, well, I haven't seen snow like this in years, and it was just, the flakes were so big, it was absolutely gorgeous, and I was just like, oh, I really want to talk to someone. Okay, so the technique basically becomes you scanning your body up and down, and the thing I can literally hear Goenka saying, anicca in my head. So like that means impermanence, like everything changes and you're just supposed to sit with it. And I don't know, I really like that sentiment and the value of the technique. And once you leave the course, he asks you to sit for an hour in the morning and an hour in the evening. And me as a university student, that is not going to happen at the moment in time. But I try and meditate for 15 minutes in the evening. In the morning and the evening. So I've been able to stick with that decently since I left. But yeah, actually practicing the technique in its fullest isn't something that I could stick to. And he also asks that you come back and you repeat the course once a year, and I can see the value in doing that, but like if I go back again and I don't have to eat, I don't know, I feel like I would do this again but in like 10 to 15 years because I need some more spiritual development. Also, I didn't really talk about my experience. Every day I wanted to leave. Every day I wanted to leave. Day 1, 2, 3 especially, I was like, I am done. I want to go. I want to go home. I don't want to be here. And like your mind is just chattering. And for me, I would use something like journaling to be able to pour out my thoughts, and to not be able to have that form of expression, I was like, I am going crazy. Like this is really hard. But I'm so impressed because at the beginning you're fidgeting so much, and then at the end of the 10 days you can actually sit there for a whole hour with your arms crossed, your legs crossed, and everything. It's called a sitting of strong determination, and you can just like actually get so deep into yourself, and it's like crazy, so good. I I don't know, I just really wanted to, this experience has, oh okay, and later on in the course, you're asked to make everything you do meditative, so like walking, everything you do in conscious, eating and being conscious. Also, this technique is really strongly linked with Buddhism, but it's, the course itself is supposed to be non-sectarian, but I didn't feel like all of the discourses were very non-sectarian because he would talk about like karma and stuff like that, and I feel like there would be barriers in place. Like for example, if you're a really devout Muslim and you're praying 5 times a day, they ask you to stop all forms of prayer, all other forms of like meditative stuff, so that might be super difficult. I feel like I could talk about this experience forever and ever, and I've literally just talked about this off the top of my head. Of course, like I had the little sheet talking about the time thing, but oh my gosh, on day 10 you break the silence and you like have conversations with people, and you just meet such amazing people, and I have continued to meet up with people afterwards. Like I've been involved in interviews about meditation, and it just kind of builds up that community. Also in London they have places where you can go and meditate, and yeah, it was just such a beautiful experience, and I'm so grateful that I got onto the course and that I did it, and now I am sharing the message of vipassana with the internet. I really hope that I covered everything, but pretty much that's everything. Thank you so much for watching. I will see you later. Bye.